Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to this CRA meeting, this August the 4th, 2022. With that, I'll call this meeting to order. Could we all please stand together for our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Blackwell.
Here.
Member Martini.
Here.
Member Askew.
Here.
Member Trace.
Here.
Vice Chair Davis.
Here.
Member Loading.
Here.
Member Irvin.
Here.
Thank you.
The first item on our agenda is approval of our minutes from June the 2nd, 2022. Are there any corrections or notations? If not, could I have a motion that we approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Davis, a second from Mr. Askew. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And there are none. Brings us to new business. The first item under new business is a presentation on downtown parking and Centennial Park.
Good evening, Antoinette Forbes, Economic Development Manager. Almost a year ago, the staff had presented to the CRA board some potential parking options. And at the time, the board had directed us to look at a different site, the one behind the St. Cloud Hotel under construction. We also decided to look at Centennial Park for possible reactivation, and that was spurred by a potential developer offering a P3 opportunity for that park. So we asked RMA as our CRA general consultant and subject matter experts to investigate both of those options for a possible public-private partnership. So today they are here to present their findings.
All right.
Good evening.
Good to have you here.
Thank you very much for the invitation to come back and share with you this next stage as you go through your redevelopment process. Kim Briesmeister, I'm a principal with RMA. My business partner, Chris Brown, and I formed RMA 13 years ago. And we have both been in the redevelopment business for 30 years plus each, helping cities make decisions that take them through this redevelopment process that you are right in the thick of. To respect your time, what we won't do is repeat things we've talked about before, but I would like to just recap one important discussion we had last time I was here, which is we were talking about your strategic finance plan. And we talked about having that kind of a document and a vision and a strategy sends a message to the private sector that is the government, you have figured out a direction that you want to go in. There probably isn't anything more important to the private sector than knowing if you want them to come invest in your city, be it open a little mom and pop retail store, build a hotel, or something else. They want to know where you're going. And so you took a very big step by creating that vision, because now we can go to the implementation stage. Tonight, as Antoinette just said, is for us to get down in the weeds. From here on, you're in implementation mode. There's no more planning. There's no more talking about what we might do. You've decided what to do. Now it's how do you do it? And another thing we talked about last time was I gave you a case study and an example of a project that was probably about 9 years old. It was, I think, the city of Pompano, and we showed you a progression of redevelopment decisions that CRA board / city commission made that led to a tremendous amount of economic change in that city. Parking revenues went from $10,000 a year to $2.8 million a year. They had a parcel that didn't have any income on it. Now they are realizing well over $1 million a year in new taxes from the private investment, and. You're at that stage right now. So what our goal tonight is to talk you through some of the, in our perception, very, very important decisions that you can make as a CRA and a commission to use your own real estate, use your powers of zoning and planning and use your ability to put pieces into place that will attract that same kind of economic development. We can bring you the suggestions and we can bring you the guideline to how to get there, but it's going to be very important that we talk through the details of that, and if there's any concerns, we do that early on so we don't lose the direction of where that strategic finance plan is going. There's 4 things really to cover tonight, and I'll be succinct, again, respectful of your time, but all 4 of these tie together. One of them has to do with your actual land. We also talked when we were doing the strategic finance plan about the powerful tool that you have of using your own land to do public-private partnerships. The private sector, including the lenders and the banking market, is going to want to understand what is the future of your city, and they want to know whether or not their investments are safe. We want to show you a very similar example of a like-kind parcel and how, actually, some 100 years ago, this city made some decisions and what it resulted in. But our focus truly is on your tax base. We are all about 2 things: real estate investment, both public and private, and what does it do to your tax base? You all are elected officials. Everybody's looking at you for the fiscal responsibility, and our goal is to help make sure that we shore up that tax base, which creates economic health and wealth for a city. The more taxes that you have to invest into your city's infrastructure and quality of life, the better quality you have for your businesses and your residents. So we're going to walk through a couple parcels, and then I'll come full circle at the end, and we'll go back to these with recommendations. In summary, what I would really like to point out is a very clear connection to all these parcels. I don't know as I'm going to tell you maybe anything super eye-opening tonight that you probably haven't already discussed. What I may be able to do is talk you through how these pieces connect and how the private sector will view the decisions you make of what you want to do with these parcels. So in summary, we're going to talk about Parcel 1, which is the parcel west of City Hall on 10th and Massachusetts. It's vacant. You've talked about that as a potential site for a garage. We'll talk about Parcel 2, which is one of the largest assemblages that is currently in this area. Number 3 is the vacant lot on the other side of City Hall, and 4th is your plaza. So let's go through them one at a time, and let's talk about what's on those sites today. Parcel 1. Parcel 1 is, as we just discussed, been, I think, on the table, and you all have talked about parking for quite a while there. And I'm going to be brutally honest with you from a real estate perspective of things that we think may help or hinder development of these parcels. You do not own the 2 parcels just to the south of it. To put up a parking garage, you need to have a certain amount of length and width for a turn radius. The differences in the length of a width of a garage will dramatically change the cost and the efficiency of a garage. And I think you're into construction and contracting, and those of you that are familiar with how projects are designed, it is very important that even though you might think you can fit something, it might not be the best location for a variety of reasons. And in this case, that site is a challenge in terms of providing a structured garage. Not that it can't be used for that at some point, it's just timing. The second is the parcel that is largely assembled that has multiple uses on it today. And you can see it's not only a very long assemblage, which is very, very conducive to any kind of structured parking, but more important, it connects 9th Street and it surrounds the parcel in the block that is just directly south of City Hall. This is a very key parcel to creating street frontage that's active, because right now I can put the pointer up and I can show up on this screen. I know you all can't see it on yours, but what's important is what happens on this street as you're coming in from your main road on your New York Avenue, your 9th Street, Pennsylvania, and as you work around this parcel, is this street frontage. And as soon as it starts to get broken up with vacant parcels, then we start to have problems with the connection between each block. We want to fix that. So while you may have talked about Parcel 2 being an extension, that one that's right on just south of City Hall, maybe that being an annex location, I would like to encourage you to consider another location for a future annex, an expansion space for City Hall to create that consistent retail grid on that particular street. That parcel, just from its sheer size, is perfect for a public-private partnership. There is not a better parcel to invite the private folks in to not only build some parking for their development, for us to use the limited funds we have to add additional public parking, but to have a third use above it. I don't know the degree of conversations you have had about what can happen on above ground floors. Residential is the hottest, most easiest thing to build in a downtown. Why? People like to live downtowns. If there's a reluctance and a resistance to building any kind of residential downtown, you always have the office market. It depends what the private sector will respond to. Whatever it is, this site is your opportunity to put up a public-private development to start to put surface parking as well as structured parking in your downtown. And again, a very important thing is you do not need, nor should you necessarily solve all of your parking problems in one location. You've been to cities and you've traveled around. There's always a smattering of parking and different types of parking, from on-street parking, surface parking, and structured parking. That's what we're looking for here with your options. The third site is your east of City Hall, which is right now being used as a surface parking lot. It breaks up the grid. It definitely breaks up the walkability. There's no interaction between somebody walking or driving and what's happening in that site. And that is a perfect site to be repurposed for something that interacts with the street. Even, again, if it was an extension of your City Hall, at least it's contiguous on one street. It's not turning a corner. And then the fourth site, as Antoinette just said, is your Centennial Park site. Right now, it's a vacant, very hot location. So any degree of asphalt that's that big is going to create a lot of heat. And as a surface parking lot, what it is breaking up in the middle of a block what could be a fantastic square. So although you may have been looking at different options to this site, what I would really emphatically like to put before you is the decision points when you decide what to put there. And I'll give you an example of that. These sites, and again, I have the detail in here. I'm not going to repeat everything we just said, but the sites and each one of them comes with the pros and the cons. This one, which we started with, which is, again, a targeted site for a potential future garage, has pros and cons to it, but we want to show you something if you were to consider using it as a structured garage. Okay, this is your site up in the upper right, and we already talked about how big it is and how many surface spaces could fit there. But if you were to build a garage, we did build a garage in the city of West Palm Beach similar to this. That's the bottom left picture. The pro of that is that in a very tight urban environment, we fit a lot of parking and we crammed it in and it fit. The con of it is, look at the building. It's a very unfriendly building on a street. And while in West Palm, the decision was made to proceed, it didn't really matter, is because this was on two major highways. It was on two major corridors. It wasn't on a main street like you have. So if we're going to try to cram some kind of a garage on a smaller parcel, we have to be cognizant of what that's going to do to the street frontage. The other thing is the cost. Cost goes up the smaller the garage, the tighter, and it's a very uncomfortable garage to get into and drive into. So if we're going to keep this site as a location for parking, our recommendation that we'll show you at the end is not necessarily to use this one for your structured garage on your own, where you build a totally public-funded garage that's going to be very difficult to afford anyway. But we want you to be aware of the connection and the street feel that happens with this kind of a structure. You could try to put in some retail, very shallow retail, on one street side, but not on both. The second site is the P3 site. So let's talk about that and what can fit there. What we would be looking for is you putting in some form of public parking, but not an entire standalone garage. Why? A developer who has this site is going to pay for the foundation for whatever he's going to build, and he's going to make revenue off of what is above the parking. You can come in and have a shared parking where a portion of that garage can be for the public. Shared parking garages are very common. They're very easy to negotiate. The developers normally like them because they have additional public parking right in their own facility, and they are getting however many 10, 20, 100, 200 more spaces in their development that can be used by their retailers and by people that are there. So we would like to see on this site, which is your largest assemblage, some form of a public-private partnership where we build some parking in it, but you're not carrying the entire cost and burden of a standalone garage. And again, our note at the bottom of this page is we do not have to solve all of the parking needs downtown in one location, but the site you're looking at right there is a real proposal, again, in West Palm, but it's in a small section of West Palm. It's called Northwood Village. Very low density, very much like downtown St. Cloud, and it's a very small project that would fit within the same kind of site constraints that you have. So now we've got a potential surface parking on one site and a potential P3 on the second site. The third site is back to your just general surface parking. We do think that that could be repurposed. We'd have to relocate those spaces somewhere, and or if you chose to put the annex there, we could do that too. But the goal is to fill up that street frontage so that as you walk down, you're creating an environment that is completely surrounded by buildings and things that are active. This is your most important one. You have the ability to take Centennial Park or Plaza, Centennial Plaza, and because of its size, make money from it. And that doesn't mean that the public doesn't get to use it. It means that the public is not going to want to come down to just a surface parking lot, which they will do if it's used for parking, but they also are not necessarily going to want to come to a site that's closed in. They're going to want to go into something that is public-oriented, but creates this center feel for a town. You don't have that town square right now. So let us give you an example. I'm very, very familiar with this particular site. Forget the state it's in. It's not about the state. Just let's walk through the similarities of your actual town grid compared to Healdsburg. This is probably one of my favorite examples of a small town urban revitalization that was small scale, very quaint, and this town has now surpassed its big sister and overshadowing neighbor Sonoma in terms of its food activity and its restaurant scene. Why? Because they kept it small, they kept it quaint, and it's incredibly unique. So Healdsburg started out 100 years ago as just a small plaza, but what they decided was to take where their government building was in the center and create this center of a town square. They wanted to make sure that all four sides had retail fronting it and that this site could be activated so they could close it off and put fences around it and have activity inside it. Sometimes they lease it out to the wine industry and they'll put fences up and they'll have events going on in there. But the rest of the time it's open so the public can walk in and walk out. This is 3 pieces of your Centennial Plaza that we are not creating these from scratch. These are just tried and true things that are going to make or break whether or not you get to enjoy that public plaza, and you have all 3. We picked this place and we picked this example because you do have all 3 about your particular plaza, and we'll talk through them. One is the location. You not only have it in your downtown, which is A, and where it is, it's right near your neighborhood centers. It's walkable. It's perfect. The second is it's adjacent to all of your buildings and your businesses. It can be surrounded by retail, and it can be insulated in the middle of a town so you get that town square. But look at C, you also have your community center. You have activities on that particular site that are currently there. Your little police station, the substation is there. I know there's an Allstate building there. You have things that are already happening there that provide not only people that are there in the daytime, workers, but you have activity on that site. So as far as being thoughtful about where it is, you don't have to create it. You already have it. The second is creating that visual and physical connection to adjacent buildings. Look at the surrounding buildings facing these plazas. You've got the physical grid in your downtown to be able to do that. And you've got the ability to make it quaint and scalable, which is what people like to do. It creates eyes on the street, which of course is very good, and people feel very safe going from place to place. And finally, programming. You've got the ability, I think, maybe with some of your P3 concepts that have been presented to you, to have somebody come in and program that space for you. It's good to program it. My concern would be if you try to wall it off. If you wall it off, you lost number 1 and 2 because it's closed in and people that are outside can't see inside. You can always leave it open and put up temporary closures and use it sometimes for programming, but you want to make sure that you enjoy that connection from both sides. And then, of course, you have the other uses that even though they're there and they'll not move, they don't need to move, you have the connectivity between these buildings that you can still create that same kind of environment. And they also could benefit from this kind of activity. So the goal, again, is the tax base. Right now, we don't have this kind of surrounding infrastructure, buildings, retailers, second floor activity. Our goal is to get there. Well, what's going to make the private sector want to get there? Let's go back to Healdsburg again, and let's look. The image on the left is that same block, just a different angle, and look at the similarities. Your road sizes are the same. You can even see that intersection that's in the bottom center that has the 2 buildings on the right in your area right across from Centennial Plaza. And then you can see how they have closed that in and made it feel very connected by adding crosswalk pavers, greenery, and on-street parking with trees. So you've got the exact same grid, and if you look in the top, on the right image, in the top back, there's your city hall. Look in their top right, and you've got a hotel and another administrative building. You have this same grid. When you can find like-kind examples that will grow into what you want it to be, that's the same size, scale, quaint environment you want, we want to try to mimic those kind of things, and you've got it all. It's not even like we've got to go out there and try to build something. We just have
Member
to sell
Matheny
it.
would like to, I think, ask a question. or
Yeah,
comment.
I do have a question. If you can go back a couple slides that shows the future expansion.
Right.
So the future expansion is on top of the VFW, which is a historic building. So does this go back? You've got it labeled, keep going back.
There you go.
Yeah, see, you've got it labeled future expansion, which is the VFW building, which the city doesn't own, and it's it's on the historic register. So does this scenario work without that piece?
It does, and future expansion doesn't mean the buildings go away or the uses go away. That doesn't have to happen. If there's activity going on in there and those buildings and uses stay, it's how do you get them to join you and integrate? Do we create walkways in front of them if they want to have some kind of activity or interaction going on at the same time? What you don't want to do is wall them off either. You want to invite those uses and those buildings to join you. You want to build value for them by putting them within this plaza. The plaza that I'm showing you in Healdsburg isn't all green. There's buildings on it too. There's things in there. So we're just suggesting don't leave them out there on their own. Have them join you and connect to you so that people can walk in front, around, and behind these buildings, and people feel comfortable in them.
Okay.
Just right now, you only own so many things, but we would like to say you want to have that interaction and that connection, but not that those buildings or uses go away, not at all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should have clarified that better, I'm sorry.
Well, you got a bunch of VFW folks sitting right behind you, so I'm sure
Get ready to take you down.
I'm sure they've all been breathing deep when
Yeah.
the slides keep coming
No,
up.
no, it's good. It's good, actually. You can sell beer out, and, a lot of revenue can come out of that, actually. And we actually have a VFW next to the city of Pompano, and same thing. It's an integration in, so that they have a tiki, and it's very integrated, and it's a great neighbor, and you already have them, so, how great is that? You don't have to go find partners. So I think, again, from a physical standpoint, how great is it that you've already got this grid, you've got the bones, for a non-technical description, and then you've got the ability, as the city CRA, to pull these pieces together. So small things, on the right is obviously your street. What we're looking at, you've got your on-street parking and some sidewalks, but we would need to fill in that feeling on the street, make it cooler by putting landscaping, make it more friendly by making sure that it connects and your crosswalks are real strong crosswalks so people feel comfortable crossing them. And then on the right-hand side, which is the south end of Centennial Park, having that connection that you're walking into something that is comfortable and you want to be there. Well, what will happen? The buildings across are going to say, boy, I want to have a little cafe here, or I want to open a retail store that will interact with this area. And coincidentally, from the time that we started using Healdsburg Plaza as the example physically for you to look at, last week I was literally in a salon and I picked up this Condé Nast travel magazine, and they had this whole article in it about Healdsburg is now one of the country's newest top America's foodie destinations. Little Healdsburg, tiny little town. What they did is they not only took the physical assets they had and they really enjoyed them and built them up, it became a very tight-knit community, but they focused in on their food industry and they became a brand. So now people are traveling to Healdsburg and it really is a destination. It's overshadowing literally big oversight of Sonoma, i.e. your Orlando or some of your larger cities. So it isn't that we're trying to be the bigger cities. We're not trying to take the assets that they have and cull them down and bringing them here. We're trying to suggest to you, find your own niche and brand, and the closest description of that that'll have the largest impact on your tax base is the example I just walked you through with Healdsburg. There's 20 examples like that out there. We can find you others as well, but the decisions that you're about to make on your parcels is where we are really trying to have this dialogue with you so that we can talk about how do you get there? How do you take those parcels, how do you put them out there, protect the assets and the partners and the people that you currently have here, and get that environment that everybody wants to enjoy as you grow your city, your town, and your tax base. So our suggestion and our recommendations is for your surface parking lot right now, or that number one, is to make that a surface parking lot. Surface parking lots are very inexpensive. You have to mill and resurface them as maintenance. If you're going to charge, we can talk through what that means to have free versus charged parking. But that is not our recommended site for a structured garage yet. Later, maybe, not today because of the strains. Number two, we want you to start to generate revenue. The biggest way to generate revenue is to have a public-private partnership, and you've got the land to do it. We already talked through what that looks like and what that could entail. Your third site of City Hall Annex is to consider, when we talked to your city manager, we had a fantastic group meeting with a lot of your department directors and some of your staff about all the different departments that are actively engaged in some form of providing parking or transportation needs, et cetera. You've got a great team effort, working on this, is to consolidate all of that, decide if you're going to do an annex to City Hall, reserve a spot for it, but let's make a decision on activating that parcel, because again, it's right across from that park. I call it a park, not a plaza. Town Square Plaza is looking at those long and short-term design options, and then looking at how you would go about inviting revenue into that, because again, people can lease it from you, close it off temporarily, and have events. So hopefully, I went fairly quickly, but hopefully what we have done is taken your discussions that you've had previously about parking in the annex and retail and et cetera, package them and given you a little bit more structure in terms of how you can create decisions moving forward that will get you that kind of economic activity and private sector investment coming to your town that you've been talking about. So thank you. That concludes my overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Allison Justice is our senior associate. She was involved in West Palm. She ran the West Palm CRA, so a lot of the examples I gave you, she's got a lot of firsthand knowledge of. I'd like you to meet her because she's now also working for you as a client. And just be glad to answer any questions you may have about anything we discussed this evening.
Before we do that, Member Davis, I believe, has some questions.
Just two at this point. The surface parking lot on parcel 1, about how many spots are you thinking that'll hold with the existing property, not including the 2 parcels to the south?
I think we had 80, do you remember? I think it was approximately 80 to 90.
So that's just basically taking what's there, asphalting it or pavers or some kind of a hard surface, striping it out, and
Yes,
not much else. So that's about 80. And then the parking structures that you would envision somewhere on the number 2 parcel, how many stories are you thinking those are?
You have, I think, a lot of discussion about your historic
Right.
preservation and what you wanted to look at, so we almost have to start there. We understand you have a height limitation, and then obviously, depending on the parcel, we can spread this out more. When we looked at the P3 that we gave you an example of, it mimicked or was very close to designs that you had looked at before from other parking structures and/or fit within the confines of your height limitations. So you have to, I think, choose heights versus floors. You know, obviously, you've got some different options there. Parking garages are higher than floors are. But I think the first question is that a site for a potential P3? I would encourage you to consider, if you're talking about 4 stories, consider maybe 50 feet, not 40. If your heights are there, you know, you might want to consider whether or not you are including things that are going on the roof. Does that count? Does your HVAC and all of your systems count? Or can that be in addition to your height limitation? Those are the small tweaks that will dramatically improve and change what you can fit on a site. But you will set that.
But doesn't that just overshadow downtown? Doesn't that just dominate the downtown?
A 4 or 5 story boarding? No, I do not believe so, because anything that is human in scale has more to do with the setback of it and how it feels. And if you'll notice where mainly parcel 2 is, it's not right on the street. One piece of it is, it's right next to City Hall. Your City Hall is 3 floors, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. When you are standing on the ground floor, if a building is 3 stories or 5 stories, it won't feel any different to you. What matters is how far back is that retail entrance, and then how far, depending on how high you go, what happens afterwards that might block shade, light, and have a sun impact. But on the ground floor, a 3 to a 5-story building is not going to feel different to you. An 8-story building will. A 3 to 5 will not.
But you can't, I mean, that's not a very wide parcel. So I'm thinking to have any kind of an economic use out of it, you're not going to be able to set it back very far, are you?
No, but you can create, not necessarily setbacks, but you can have open spaces where a restaurant can be there, but it can be open with an outdoor patio area, kind of like Friars, where you've got a little bit of outdoor seating before you get to the building. So it's usable, rentable space.
And that, you don't think that that's going to throw just a terrible shadow in the rising and setting suns over the existing uses east and west of it?
I do not. I truly do not.
Okay.
Member Askew.
Thank you, Mayor. One is, you just said there was a height limitation. There is a height limitation in our downtown?
Yes,
Sure.
yes.
What's the height limitation?
I believe it's 5 stories, but that isn't defined necessarily in number of feet. Am I correct or am I incorrect?
I'd have to check on that. I
Yeah.
don't think I know.
Because you did a garage study, and we based it off of the garage study.
It's higher than 5. Yeah.
What's
You can
that?
go higher? Okay, then we stuck to 5.
Okay.
Then we stuck to 5 because there was something that we saw that we said, oh, there's a cap here. There's some problem to go above that. If you start to go above 5, then you would have parking issues.
Right. The other, that actually wasn't my question, but when you said that, I'm like, oh, I didn't know we had that. But I'm not an engineer, but I would assume 3 and 4 could be blended together, that we own that road. So I would assume that that road could become part of a parking garage, but that might be a little bit more better for a P3 development down the road. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if that could or couldn't, but just different solution, that's all.
You would lose your street grid,
Right.
which we're trying to
Right,
retain,
right.
but you could.
Somehow. yeah.
Member Matheny.
Thank you. Yeah, I liked your idea on parcel 3 about expanding the city hall. I hadn't really thought of it that way as like, you know, the experience of the pedestrian and things. I mean, I thought that was interesting. But one of the things to keep in mind, because I lived through the parking garage at the county building, and like when it was initially discussed, I was on the selection committee for the parking garage, and it was supposed to be the entire city block. And then that's the way the presentations were, and they said it would be no higher than the admin building, which if you've been down there, you know the parking garage is much taller than the admin building, but they also didn't take the entire city block, they shrunk it. But it's interesting, it's an 8-story parking garage next to a 4-story building, but the parking garage isn't that much taller because the height of the floors of a parking garage are much smaller than the height of the floor of a building, so keep that in mind. Like, a 5-story parking garage is probably the same height, or 6-story, it would probably be the same height as this building. Like, the floors are smaller, like, if you think about it, like, the first floor of the county parking garage is very, very tall, so that, like, big trucks and things can get in, and then the rest of them are just standard height, but, anyways, something to think about. But I understand what you're saying about efficiency of the parking garage, things like that. Yeah, you scared me a little with your expansion on the VFW.
My apologies.
I wasn't really so sure about that, but I sure am glad we held off when I first got on city council. Remember, there was the whole big plan with a fountain and a this and a that. That would have totally ruined parcel number 4, so I'm glad we held off on that. There was a plan, it was a big fountain right in the middle of this area, and then there was like an elevated grass, like kind of to watch a band shell, but that obviously didn't move forward. So anyways, I do like the idea of the number 3 expanding the building that way, or some sort of building along that way.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting also, when I first come on the council, the thing that, remember the thing you referred to was taking that whole block there where number 4 is and trying to convince the VFW crowd to give us that building or to let us replace it and turn that whole area into a plaza. But I think it's certainly relevant. Here we are again and taking, getting a recommendation to take that same area because it is central, and I like that. I like that a lot.
We definitely need trees.
Yeah.
You do.
Member Loading.
The only, when I look at it, I like everything you have said in integrating parking with, the structures and everything. But when I look at parking in the downtown, I always look, if I look at this, all the parking is going to be way off on the right. And, we have a movie theater and we have different things going on downtown. So parking's way over here, then the focus here right now is New York and, say, Pennsylvania Avenue. If it was more central, the majority of the parking was more central, I think makes more sense, but I don't see how that could ever work, but I just wanted to throw that out there. But if it's more central, it always just seems so far off to the side. Because, if you were going to the movie theater, you gotta park, let's say where 2 is or 1 is, and you're gonna have to walk all the way down where they're parking right now is in where 4 is. And when they're downtown shopping on, say, New York, or, if they're parking over where 4 is, now they're gonna be parking, well, that wouldn't be too bad if it was 1. At least 1's more, if they have flat parking there, it is more centralized. It is off to the right, but it is more centralized in our downtown. But just want to throw that out there.
Member Trace.
Do you want to respond to that?
You have, actually, and we didn't get into it tonight, but you have an incredible street grid with a lot of on-street parking availability. And one of the conversations with staff is what other parcels are out there. For the sake of tonight, we condensed it to just this area, but what you're bringing up is very important. Because like I just said, you don't want to solve all your parking in one area. You have to spread it out. So my suggestion would be, as this develops, we take this area, and from a parking perspective, we do what is concerning you, which is look much beyond it. Because you do want to look at other surface areas. There'll be other P3s, but for now, you got to start somewhere. But I think you're bringing up a very good point that needs a little bit more of a comprehensive look.
Can I say one more thing? Because what we're looking at is we're looking at the grid of between Mass and New York and Pennsylvania, but really there's one more section over here.
Yes.
There's really three grids running there, and we're only seeing the 2 over here.
Understood.
Okay.
Member Trace.
Thank you. I'll go in kind of your number order. On section number 1, I thought we were already retaining someone to do a design on the parking lot there.
No, sir.
I think staff did like a preliminary estimate for us. Remember to leave it dirt. We were arguing leave it dirt or pave it. I think staff did some internal, and it wasn't cheap. I know she said it's
Yeah.
cheap, but I mean it wasn't cheap.
Okay.
If I recall, it's
we
around
have
400,000.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
Oh, yeah, for some reason I thought we like were moving forward with that just to
No, sir.
solve the safety issue of people parking there. Okay, so, and then on number 2, I guess at one point, and I think it was with the parking garage study, the City Hall expansion was on, I think, a parcel you called 2C, that one just south of City Hall. I guess if we're doing a P3 there, what's the use for that part of the property?
In a P3, a developer would want to use that to have frontage on New York and Ninth. So they would extend their, probably they'd take their air rights up, but they would want to have that surface connection for New York for retail.
Okay, so that would be a retail, office, residential piece, and then the area west of it would just be parking garage the whole length, is that the thought?
There'd be parking the whole length, depending, because, I'm not sure how it would bookend. But what's important is what's above it. We'd have to have a discussion about what is your preference, are there limitations on what you will allow above it? Will you allow people to live and have residential units up there? That will change how it interacts if it's office. If there's no market for office, can we go back to residential, et cetera? So there would be parking that would go the length of 2, but again, depending on turn radiuses, how it's designed, how many units are there. The bookends of buildings are very important, so the north and the south, and that 2C is going to be very important, but that's value. It just adds value for a developer.
Because I think there's a huge need and value for office in downtown, because a lot of the businesses that would be here are having to move into some of those flex industrial spaces on the east side of town, not even close to downtown, because there's no availability for any office downtown. Anytime there's something comes up, it's either dilapidated or it just fills up instantly. So I think if we're going to go out for an RFP, having some of that in there of, I almost don't even want to have residential as part of that, because it convolutes it some of, you have tenants now that are 24 hours a day instead of businesses that are there that can, generate some of the income for this area, and then also bring daytime traffic downtown instead of just people stay here and then they go somewhere else. The reason, I pulled up the old parking study that we did, I guess that was late last year. The height of it, there were 2 options, one with a express ramp and one was parked on ramp, 59 feet and 64 feet to the highest deck level. And that was 6 levels. The reason it was so high for that 6 level is because we had the retail attached to the front of the building, because then I think it was 17 feet to the second deck because we had that retail. So that's, I think, part of the reason that the county's parking garage is so high for that first to second floor, because of that retail frontage that they have. So I'd kind of want that to be not part of it, to where we can get as much parking as we can in there, because the structure is still going to cost what it's going to cost. I'd rather get as much efficiency as we can out of it. And then, kind of the moneymaker is if it's set back some from 10th Street, they can have a standalone building there, or even if it has breezeway connections, and then same on parcel 2C. And then the back part behind City Hall, I think, was going to be stormwater at one point, or there's already a small pond there, and we'd probably have to expand it. City Hall expansion on parcel 3 is fine, but I think timing-wise, we'll have to make sure that there's the additional parking first before we start taking out other parking. Kind of same comment for Area 4. And yeah, I've been to a bunch of events in that Centennial Park area, and it's just, even in the grass it's hot, even under the shade it's hot. I mean, it's just plant trees now. Let's figure out what kind of layout we want, just plant the trees now, even if it's taking out a parking spot or 2, and then it's going to take 50, 75 years, like that picture you had, for those trees to grow up and make it a cool park like that. But and then as part of, if we're talking acquisition strategy to make some of this happen, I think those 2 holdout parcels on 10th Street in Centennial Park area, I think would be the perfect two to purchase instead of the 2 on the south side of Area 1.
Okay.
Because that kind of rounds that out. The VFW, we're hopefully going to make that look all fancy now, and then we'll have the rest of it to be the park as we phase in these parts of the plan.
I appreciate that input. I have one other example that I can give you, and we're literally doing it now. It's going to cost, but there is a plaza, we call it the backyard, that's going to go the opposite. It's going to go in the middle of these buildings. And there's currently a 35, 40-foot ficus tree that's back there. And the goal is to have the other part shaded as well. And just what you said, trees take a long time to grow. We literally are digging up, and for $30,000, very expensive, we're going to move a 40-foot tree over there and take our time to build the other trees around it and let them grow. But if you choose wisely and you get the right kind of tree, and actually it's an oak that's coming over, you might pay a little more, but you can have instant gratification with real important things like shade. In Florida, there's nothing more important. So I think you're all hitting really key components of what's going to make a difference. It has to happen quickly. So I appreciate that.
Member Davis.
Do we feel like that St. Cloud really is to the point where people will pay to park?
That's a good question. My request would be, let's not answer it yet. I think we have a little bit of due diligence and reconnaissance to do on this P3 before you can go there.
How do we figure that out?
Well, number one, you have to have the demand. If the demand is there, people will pay. People like the path of least resistance. They will circle a block 5 times trying to find an on-street surface parking space before they'll go in a garage. Once we've exhausted all of our on-street parking and our surface parking, and there is no other choice and people have to go in a garage, that's already your first step, that they have to go in there. We're not quite there yet, but it also depends on the decisions you make with all these parcels.
But where's the point of resistance where they can't find the on-site parking spot, but before they go in the parking garage, they go to a different commercial parcel outside of downtown?
Normally, if you develop this town that has enough things in it that people drove from somewhere, not just walked a little bit, but or drove 2 blocks, that they want to go to that restaurant, they want to go to that movie theater, they want to do something there, and hopefully do 2 things, not just one, they're not likely to come and get that frustrated that they drive away and then go through another 20, 30, 40-minute drive somewhere else. What they have to do is, depending on how much they know the area, they have to exhaust that easy, low-hanging fruit of on-street parking before they'll get in the garage.
But maybe they don't go that time, but then what about the next time where they're like, last time we had to pay to park, we had trouble finding parking, let's not go there, let's go here.
Yeah, again, it depends on your assets. If those restaurants and those destination places are more appealing, that's what we're laser focused on, is getting that type of activity going on, they will come there.
Member
And
Logan.
then, one last thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Doesn't the city have an ordinance that requires parking lots to be paved?
That's correct.
I'd hate to see us violate our own ordinance with our own dirt parking lot.
That's the discussion we had last time when we
Yeah.
talked about.
Exactly. Because, I mean, the point of it is not to track dirt into your street drain system. Largely. That's it.
Member Loading.
I just wanted to, I'm the opposite of Member Trace, but I like the idea of having residential downtown and build up a little higher scale or luxury apartments. I think it would be good, I think that'd be good for our downtown. But I wanted to ask you this question. When you build a joint building like this, do they allow like 2 parking spots per apartment? Is that how they would do that? Would they allow, what do they normally do, I guess is my question.
They'll first start with your code. They're going to look and see what your code requires. Sometimes codes are very onerous, especially older codes. They may then go for a request for a variance to reduce the amount of parking spaces. In other words, if you have a couple 1-bedrooms, that a lot of younger people want to live in 1-bedrooms, they don't have 2 cars. So the developer doesn't want to provide 2 parking spaces for that 1 bedroom. So first of all, what's your code say? And then we would look again at the constraints of that site. At the end of the day, as government, we can want a lot of things. The private sector is going to agree or not agree to build something. So we have to know what the market says. We can run analytics on what the supply and demand is for both residential and commercial. And if you give us the green light and we go the next step, that's exactly what we're going to do tomorrow, is we're going to go run all of the analytics and come back to you and say, we might want residential, but there's no market for it, they're not coming right now, or vice versa. You know, there is no market today for office, here's why. We might perceive that people are going elsewhere, but we have to know for sure what is the private sector going to do and not do. So I think you've got to start with your code. We will look at the most efficient modern way of dealing with code. Remember, people are moving around a little bit different now. We're doing two things really different than we did 5 years ago. We shop different. You know, I'm not young, and I don't normally get on that computer, whereas my son and daughter-in-law, boy, they'll buy on Amazon, 5 times a day. I've now probably bought more on Amazon in the last year than I have in the last 10, just because COVID forced us to. A lot of us have, and we're the older generation that had to change. The other thing we do is we get around different. We never had Ubers. Now we get in Ubers, and we have other ways of getting around. You have a phenomenal street grid here, and you have a lot of people. This is very walkable. So I think a lot of things with this particular site, especially, I'm very bullish on residential, because I just think residential creates vibrancy. But you do need office. You need daytime traffic, otherwise your
Right.
daytime restaurants suffer. We got to solve both. They don't all have to be solved in
Yeah,
one
it has
site.
to be a combination.
Has to be a
of both of them.
combination.
But the residential is going to compete for your parking spaces that you need for your nighttime entertainment.
Well, that's why you gotta have enough parking. That's why I was
Yeah.
wondering, how do you figure that
Yeah.
out? So to make sure,
Yeah.
you gotta make sure it's there.
You do, but that's what this is all about.
But I think a one-bedroom apartment needs 2 parking spots, though, because you take a young couple, they may rent that apartment, but they're going in 2 different directions for jobs, so
Yeah, some are, and then that's that
it
balance.
can't be one.
It's a balance. So we start with code, and then we work our way backwards.
Okay.
Member Matheny.
Thank you. So I lived in a 27-story condo building in Charlotte, North Carolina, before I moved back, and it was like a restaurant on the first floor, the parking, then the parking kind of went up behind it, then there was offices, and then the parking started, and so I personally lived in it, where it was nice because I lived in the building, and I had interior design services. I went down to whatever floor that was. We went and got wine on the first floor, so you kind of like start living in the space you're in. But I had a 1-bedroom and I had 1 space. Like that's the way my parking was. And then the bigger units got more spaces. And then I believe there were spaces you could buy beyond that, which I didn't, because I didn't have that kind of money to buy a space. And so it was a challenge when you had like somebody come visit. Like I'd have a friend come stay for the weekend. It was a challenge because I didn't have space for them to like park. But I wanted to ask, so I'm a fan of the mix of things in the building. And, we've always been talking about city halls running out of space and we're doing an expansion. But I mean, does it make any kind of sense to put city hall as the business in the office floor of the building, or?
Depends if you want to own your own space.
Right, I'm just thinking about economic development and things like just, so like the second and third floor of the building is used for expansion of city staff. But the last thing I wanted to ask is, I agree about sprinkling parking around. We're all lazy and it's hot. I mean, I don't want to get ready for dinner and then have to walk 6 blocks and I'm a hot, sweaty mess by the time I get there. But how is the parking agreement going with the church? Like, are people utilizing it?
I don't know. I know we send them
Because
money
that's
every
kind of
month.
the same thing. I mean, we're basically
Internet.
doing this on the other side, so are people using it?
I've seen it packed.
Didn't that fall
totally full.
apart?
What?
Didn't the church post that and just this weekend and put,
What?
do not park here? That parking agreement doesn't exist, I don't believe.
So I can
No,
respond.
we have a parking agreement.
So I can respond to that if you like. So we do have a parking agreement between the church, the city, and the CRA, because the 2 lots, one side is CRA and the other side is the city. We have signage that we use that directs people to that lot. Primarily, we usually put those signs up for the monthly market, or if there's other particular city-sponsored events that we need to send people to. On a daily basis, people are not using it as much, but I would equate that to, because we don't have the signage up telling them you can now go to this spot. And I also
Wayfinding,
believe,
yeah.
yes, wayfinding signage. And I also believe that, I think it's our PIO who's working on signage in conjunction with the church that says you can park here, something that's a little more permanent.
Yeah, because I know I worked with the city manager to get that in place, and we pay, I think, $500 a
$500,
month or
yes, ma'am.
something to, but there are times that we aren't allowed to use it.
Correct.
If-
Right.
You know,
Correct.
there are times, it's not a blanket all the time, anytime. If they have events, they supersede us, so.
Yes, and I also just want to add to that, that they have required that we reserve certain spaces on Wednesday nights for like choir practice or something.
Boy
So we
Scouts.
have those spaces blocked off intentionally so people don't park there.
Didn't something happen over the weekend where they put up some kind of signage and said, don't park here?
I'm not
Unless you're
aware,
going to the church? I'm trying to find out right now. There's something happened over the weekend.
I'm not aware of this weekend, but for city-sponsored events, particularly like the monthly market, we do make sure that we put signage out. So if there was a city event this weekend that I'm now aware of, I know my office did not put signage out.
No, I think he's saying the church said only church parking.
Right, something
That's what
happened
he's
over the
saying.
weekend where the church put up some kind of parking that's put church parking only or something. I'm trying to find out.
Well,
what that
anyways,
was.
I was just
But they
curious,
have
because we're
events.
having the discussion, basically a mirror image of it, like, so are people parking? I mean, I know we don't really have great signage, because when we were negotiating the deal with the church, I said, how the heck would anybody know? Like, I would not drive and park on a church parking lot unless I was like 100% sure. Like, I come from the University of Florida where your car gets towed. I have PTSD for that, so.
Yes, we have,
Right, that's a few
specifically for the monthly market, we have no parking signage, we have parking this way signage, and then we have signage at the church that says you can park here.
Okay.
Do you have a picture of that, Mayor?
Member Trace.
Thank you. So I'm not against the residential there, but you'd have to get to 10, 12, 15 stories for something to work and get enough units for it to matter, and I think that just is way out of scale for this spot in downtown. And if we do something there, I think it is more beneficial for the city for it to be office and retail than residential. So, but I do think that in the downtown, our problem with getting any sort of density in any of these infill lots is our parking code, and it's not because of the parking garage, it's because of the 4.5 units an acre. So if you want to do a duplex or want to do a duplex on one of these lots that, out in California, there's a ton of them that were done back in the day, you need 9 parking spots for those, because it's 4.5 spots per, yeah, so it's a sea of parking for the 2 units. So that's, I think, the reason we don't have more density or infill downtown.
But downtown doesn't have parking requirements, right?
In the residentially zoned areas, it does. C1, the CBD 1 and 2 don't.
Right.
But that's like 4 blocks, 8 blocks. That's not the whole downtown. So I think we can get more infill, one with the ADU, which I think is coming back around at some point, and then also, I don't know if we just figure out something different for downtown. If we want more people down here, incentivize it that way. Okay, that's it.
Member Urban.
So I do like the idea of a P3 opportunity for Zone 2, and I wouldn't mind doing all of the commercial, residential, and parking. My question is there a demand from the private sector to do something there? Do you think it would be hard to find a P3 partner to do that with at this point in time?
Good question. It's a very, very hot market right now, all over our country. Florida in particular, as we've all, seen. Interest rates are still relatively low, even though they're rising, and, they just did another 75 basis points last week. It is still, in historical perspective, a very low interest rate. All the clients that we have, all the cities and all the markets we're in, residential market is still very, very hot. You're geographically located near larger markets, so I see no reason that a mixed-use developer that specializes in residential would not be attracted. Residential is just much, much, much easier to build and cash flow. Parking is a problem with office because the parking requirement's usually 4 per 1,000, feet, and it's a little harder to fill office than residential. But I think what I would suggest is let us do a little supply and demand, on the back of a napkin and see if that just rules anything out. There might be some markets around here we haven't looked at for you. And if they're both viable, there's nothing wrong with putting out a bid and letting both respondents come in. There's no reason you need to limit it if there's supposedly enough supply or demand for both.
Thank you. Good question. Anyone else? Do you have anything else to share?
I do not, other than to thank you. Again, very, very good dialogue. I appreciate the thoughtful discussion. It's really, in my opinion, what makes for great cities, and I'm very excited for where this city's going.
Thank you. You did an excellent job.
Thank you.
So, sorry. So now to quote Kim, we are in the implementation phase of our 5-year plan. So at this point, we would need direction on how you would like staff to proceed, either in part or in priority of anything that was recommended.
Okay. Mr. Sturgeon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to talk about the surface parking on 1. Is that something we want to revisit? You know we have a huge parking problem downtown, which I always think is a good thing. We just need to solve it in pieces. Could we go back and look at that, of surfacing that parking lot behind the hotel? I'm guaranteed it's going to be more than 400,000 because we know supply chain and inflation, but I'd like to see if we could go back and take a look at that.
Member Davis.
Yeah, I would be in favor of that, especially if you can do it, meet the code, put some kind of hard surface on there that's as temporary as possible, so that once we decide to go to a different use on that at some point down the road, we're not destroying any more value than we have to. But I think we ought to look at that, because we're hampering a lot of these businesses downtown that night because there's just no place to park. Not even considering the current construction situation, but even after that.
Member Matheny.
Thank you. I would agree with that as well. Is that something that we can pay for with CRA dollars?
Yes, ma'am.
So does it have to come back to council? Or can we give you direction to like go hire an engineer and go forth with the design kind of a thing?
It would, if you're using CRA dollars and it's a CRA project, then it would
Mm-hmm.
have to come back to the CRA once you had an idea of how much for approval as to the item.
But does the city manager have an approval limit?
It's the same,
It's
50,000.
pretty much the same.
I mean,
limit.
I would think you should be able to get that designed within your approval limit. I mean, I don't know how the other part of the board feels, but I would just like to move it forward and get a contract if it's within your approval authority and expend the money to move forward. I don't want to come back and hold it up in meetings and
Well,
do
I'd
we
certainly
have the
like to see us-
dollars?
I would certainly like to see us move forward on it as soon as all of this other construction revitalization work gets done. You're going to have a much greater need for parking than we're struggling with even now, I would think.
So you don't want to start it until the construction's done?
No, I just said when the construction work gets done on the streets, it's going to be an even greater problem. That's certainly a problem even now.
I don't think you could actually start the physical work of it while they're doing downtown, though, because they're using it as storage, and that would exacerbate that problem. If you could, when you're looking at it, I don't know if there's some way to consider that something other than asphalt, where you could have some of the events that we have downtown where they set up tents and things like that, and be able to tie down the tents. I don't know if there's something, maybe there's certain pavers that are like an open grid almost. Maybe we could use something like that, and then they could attach the tents if we have an event that's in there through that without damaging the parking surface, just as an added use for it down the road.
Member Trace?
I think that's a patentable idea. Figure out how to make one of those. Do we remember if it was pervious? I remember there being a stormwater discussion about it, and we needed pervious pavers, and that might have been why the cost was so high.
I vaguely remember, I don't want to say and be
Okay.
wrong. I think we did look at pervious pavers,
Right.
and I think we done a lot. I did some preliminary engineering work. I just have to pull those plans up and look.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with it. To design and permit, it's probably going to take till the end of the year anyway, so.
Correct.
Hopefully the streetscape and City Hall will be done by then, so it'll be roll right into construction on that. So
Yeah.
I'm fine designing it now,
Yes, sir.
hopefully that can stay under your $50,000 limit, we can just go.
I have consensus of the board? All right, thank you.
Any objections?
Thank you.
If not, you have consensus.
Are we ready?
Go ahead.
So the next item is the update on the Bfw Agreement. If you recall, on April 7th, 2022, the last CRE board meeting, the board authorized the city manager in his capacity as the executive director to negotiate an agreement up to $120,000 with the VFW and a commitment to reconvene if additional funds were required. At this point, the VFW has now started receiving bids on the cost of construction, and they are back to request additional funding. I've included a copy of the agreement, which was executed, however, not recorded, because we did not have a time in terms of a time to start construction, which was included in the agreement, and therefore we could not record it. And I believe there's a representative from the VFW here.
They've already signed the contract, though.
Correct.
They signed the
They haven't
contract.
received bids, they've signed a contract.
Correct. They
right.
signed the contract. We did not record it yet, though.
Please come forward.
Good afternoon.
State your name for the record, please.
Rafael de Jesus, I'm representing the VFW and the current commander. Thank you for having us. As you guys know, we started this process last summer. The original idea was to beautify the building. That will help us continue to be partners with the city, make the downtown area prettier and have a better usage of the building. The original plan that the architect came up with, it was around $120,000 for the build. And then our membership did a vote, and we agreed to contribute 10% of the construction cost. And that will put us around 132, that unauthorized, funding that is available right now, including the CRA money. Due to the time that it took to get a bidding process through, and we just got it, I sent the bids to about 5 local companies. Due to the scope of the project, some of the big ones didn't want to take it because it's a small project to them. So we only received 2 bids back, and we chose the lowest one. It came out at 165, pretty much. That's not including the cost of permitting, which I understand is something 15% or something like that. Yeah, 15%. So that will put us around 190. So if you do the math, 120 plus a 12%, we still do 10% on our end. We get about $50,000 shortfall to complete the project. We did submit the permit. We are prepared to do what we have to do on our end. I just wanted to see if the CRA will help us bridge that gap that we have in the funding for the project. We are prepared to contribute more if we have to, but our idea is not to be broke. We are a nonprofit organization, so I don't want to invest in a building and then have zero funds to do what we're supposed to be doing, which is helping veterans and invest in the community. So we chose a local contractor. The permit is in place. It's broken down in 2 phases. Phase 1 is the roof and the entryway, and phase 2 is the brick work. The brick layer, the brick veneer facing of the building, that's a longer project. That's the most expensive part of the project. That's about $110,000. The roofing is the cheapest part. That's about $54, I think it is, altogether. So the timeline, if we get it all going, is about a month for the roof, about 2 or 3 months for the brick layer. So we're talking about 4 months for completion from as soon as we give it the go. Other than that, that's all we got as far as the update for the building.
Mr. Sturgeon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to let Mr. DeHace know and the board know, I did verify with the building official and with community development, we can waive those permit fees. So that would help you guys out also.
Okay,
So that's what, about 25,000 of the 190?
yeah.
So what does that make you short?
So that will put,
33, I think.
I'm sorry?
so that will put us in about $35,000 shortfall. Because I forgot to mention, the Historical Preservation Board did a change order, basically requested a different material for one of the pieces, and that was $2,500 cost increase that is not included in the original contract. So we're looking at about $35,000.
Member Matheny, anything else?
Well, actually, yeah, that was the thing. I just asked the city manager, can we waive the fees? Because that seems like something we could do. So I know I've talked with, Rafi about the project and kind of like understanding it along the way. And some of you haven't heard my, dialogue about the Historic Preservation Board and how I really love it and support it, but it's creating a lot of problems getting it rolling, of just, growing pains, I guess. Like, it's a new program and comments aren't being made and things like that. The plans for the renovation, as you remember, came out of the city. So then, they bid it, and then it's like, oh wait, the so we as the city even missed that box of checking the historic preservation. So I think all these things have contributed to the delays and things that have happened. I know in my job, we are constantly having escalation in material prices between when it was bid, by the time we get it to the board and approved, it's been 6 months, and then they need a change order before we even start, because prices have escalated 30%. I mean, if we're talking about a $35,000 shortfall, I would support providing that to the VFW.
Member Davis.
I would support that, but where in the budget do we have that it's going to come out of? Or do we have the money, and where in the budget can we take it out of?
So if you recall, when we did the fund allocation balance, where we had budgeted, I think it was initially $100,000 to the VFW and $300,000 to the St. Cloud Hotel and $800,000 or so for the parking. So we would basically need the CRA board to agree that we can take some of that funding and reapply it to this project.
Okay, where are we taking it from? Which project are we taking it from?
My suggestion would be the parking garage.
So are we about to get another influx of, I'm sorry, Joel. Are we about to get another influx of dollars from the county when the new budget year starts October 1st? Because they're giving us the money based on the agreement, not the taxable value. So are we getting ready to get additional funds?
Yeah, when does that agreement expire again?
How long was it?
2031.
Something like,
2031?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
December
Right.
2031.
Do you have anything else, Mr. Davis?
Well, wait, so when
She
does,
had a
when does
question.
the money, when does the money come in from the county? Is it
Finance
about to
director?
happen?
I'm not, yeah.
You know, when we get the tranche of money, that's our new word, tranche of money from the county.
I like buckets, but
be
the
like
finance people
October,
don't
right?
like that.
Good evening, Wendy Colazzo, Finance Director. The new tranche of money comes in roughly about November. When we bill, it's already called on your budget for other uses. So at this current time, unless you take from another project, you don't have any available budgeting for that. You also have to factor in the fact that your capital plan is calling on the 5-year strategic plan for the CRA. So there is no funding unless you reallocate.
So the 50,000 we just talked about, or up to 50,000 to do the design for the parking lot comes out of where?
That's what I was saying in the background. Where are you getting the money? Because you don't have it.
Well, that's problematic.
Well, I mean, I will look at the budget, and then we could do a budget transfer. It's not a budget amendment, it'd be a budget transfer. It's within the
Just as
same-
it lays
it's in the
right now.
same fund.
Yeah. If you do budget transfers or have another strategy, sure. But at this moment, your budget does not have that.
Okay, so how about this, where we're talking about taking it out of the parking garage money? Is that available?
If you would like to reallocate that to that, yes, just be aware of the cost of the parking, and the contribution that the CRA would make affects this funding strategy for the rest of the funds that are contributing to that. We got a ticket price about projected at $15 million for the parking. So it's a reallocation of strategy, just as a reminder, but you can do that.
And that's not counting any potential increases, which are almost guaranteed at this point, cost increases?
Yes, sir, we factored some cost increases that we have across the budget to hopefully buffer. But if anything is called on like it is right now that we can't foresee, so workable, just, got to be cautious. Also, as you saw, the 75 basis points that was mentioned earlier before, we're projecting some high unrealized gains at this point. That makes us cautious, that's all.
Right. Yeah, because that's just the beginning,
Yes, sir. So
probably.
we can do it if, I gotta think a little bit for y'all. I could-
Yeah, you don't seem overly anxious to
I'm not nervous, I just cautious,
Really?
that's all. Just gotta think a little bit and, and the best strategy, so we'll try to make it work. We could do a budget amendment from another fund to subsidize the CRA, that's a possibility.
Can the CRA legally borrow out of another fund?
Can they? They'd have to repay it back,
Yeah, you have
but.
a repayment resolution.
Well, couldn't
But-
you just instead, like with the parking lot design, fund that out of a different, not CRA, right?
That's right.
I mean, you could just not pay it or swap it or whatever, it just be funded out.
And it is city property, so that,
City property, yeah.
but we can look at that strategy too, to use
If this
city
committee
funding.
determines that the CRA will not make a contribution, they don't have to, and then we go back to the drawing board to kind of fund another strategy for the parking. I could tell you that that's probably the easiest to make this happen, and so you have some funding source right now. You could do that, just, I mean, it's the CRA's option if they want to contribute. They're going to use space without contributing to the cost, just factor that in.
I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and allocate this for the VFW, because I don't think waiting is going to help them in the long run. It's just going to continue to get more and more expensive. I guess just if all of us feel comfortable with the funding mechanism.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from Member Davis, second from Member Matheny, and Member Urban. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, so I definitely support that motion. I would definitely support that, and coming from the construction industry, I understand how costs have gone up. One of the things that I've sort of expressed my frustration with Mr. Sturgeon, and a few meetings back, we allocated $300,000 to the hotel, and I know this is a touchy subject, but nothing has been done, and it just seems like it's just sitting stagnant right now. So, I mean, I wouldn't even be opposed to using funds for that. There's other areas within the CRA that are ready to use it now, and if the hotel is not going to do anything, we kind of allocated those funds to have them get a roof on before hurricane season, and we're approaching the peak of hurricane season now, so it's been frustrating to continue to see that eyesore downtown, and I'd rather put it towards use someone that will use it. So that's just my thoughts.
Member Trace.
Couldn't agree more, but we'll save that comment on the hotel for later. On your motion, how much was it?
Yeah, we need to clarify
I
the
think it
amount.
was 35, right?
So the 120 was already allocated, and then
Yes.
this is an additional 35.
So essentially what you would be doing is amending the existing agreement to have the funding amount go from 120 to 155,
Up to 155.
up to 155.
Up to 155.
And that's how the agreement is written.
But we're waiving the permit fees.
Yeah, but
And 155 was the bid, right? So it should be less the,
Well, no, the bid is 165.
165, okay,
Because
sorry.
we're contributing 10% of our end, on our end,
Okay.
our membership.
I found it, so it's amending it to be 155. Okay,
Up to,
perfect.
right.
Up to one.
Up to.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Sturgeon.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to circle back. We talked about doing the engineering for the parking behind the hotel. Since you're sitting as the CRA, I can't take direction from the board for city money, so I'll bring it back at the meeting on the 11th to get that reallocated. It is under my authority. I do have money in professional services to do that, but I'll bring back and just bring that question at the August 11th meeting and make sure we discuss that and get
All right.
direction from that. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion? I believe the motion is that we increase the amount, $35,000, that we allocate $155,000 up to $155,000 for this project. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And there are none.
And they're not going to make you tear it down, okay?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, guys, for having us. And listen, our goal is to become a better partner with the city and continue to build the partnership that we built in the last few years. And that thing is will be a great piece of, change the eyesore, another eyesore downtown to something nice. So thank you so much, and you guys, man, open doors anytime.
If I could.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sturgeon.
Chairman, thank you. I've got the previous commander here and the new commander. You guys are phenomenal. I've enjoyed working with you the last 5 years. I want to talk about Raphael for just a minute. He's agreed, the Christmas tree's always been controversial. He's agreed to put it right on that corner in the VFW in the parking area so we can keep it downtown and have that Christmas tree lighting right there. So it'll be right there on the corner, opposite of where it's usually at. So thank you for that partnership. That's pretty awesome.
And that's a key. We strive to continue to do that. I mean, I don't know if you guys are aware. We even held a couple of camps in our building, in the Annex building. And when we finish doing this construction, we're going to rename it Soldier City, Veterans Hall, I believe it is. If you guys have a better idea, we're open to suggestions.
No, that's great.
That's awesome.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Christmas tree is controversial?
The corner is, you're going to take out 2 places and put.
Oh. I thought somebody had a problem with the Christmas tree.
I think he's
What the heck?
We'll get a Charlie Brown Christmas tree instead.
We don't want to lose 2 parking spots.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll give you 2.
Brings us to the next item on the agenda, the adoption of 2022-23 budget resolution number 2022-005 CR.
So this item is exactly as was explained. It's resolution number 22-005 CR, the adoption of the CRA budget, keeping in mind that the budget itself will be part of the city's budget, which has to go before council approval. However, as historically, we've provided this budget to the CRA board in advance. We are doing so to you now. When the budget is actually adopted by city council, it will be transmitted to the Board of County Commissioners as required by Florida statute.
Do you have any? You through?
Oh, yes, I am.
All
So
right.
sorry.
Okay. Member Trace.
Thank you. Same question I have for all budgets when they come in front of us. On the professional services front, the $120,000 that's budgeted, what is that for?
Yeah, we don't have copies of that. I didn't bring
I think that's 531. So yes, that's a couple of items. The biggest ticket item is the RMA, the CRA consultants. Their total contract is actually $100,000. However, we took 50 from this fiscal year and 50 for the upcoming fiscal year. That also includes some of the programming that we intend to do with the CRA, including some market analysis and land analysis for potential site for land acquisitions as proposed by the CRA board.
Okay, and the paint plant, whatever the other P is that a specific line item in here now? I don't.
So that is under, I think it's grant and aids, if I'm not mistaken. Just a second. Yes, that's under suffix 82-02.
The BTR grants?
Correct.
We don't have that slide with that information.
Oh, sorry, that was in the email.
Yeah, it was in the email. I didn't bring it. I usually bring a copy with me, but I have something like that. We don't have a copy of what
Put it up on the screen.
we're up on the screen.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I don't think I do. I think it's only in the packet. It's only in the packet. Would you like my copy?
That's
Can we
all right.
put, can you put the slide up on the,
Sure. Give me
I'm
one
sorry,
second.
I just,
No,
No,
no.
I
no,
walked
it's a
out
good question.
without it. Seemed like I had a question.
Kelly and I were there before Saturday or something. You were driving up there.
Yeah, she sent a picture of the Grace. Should have wrote back.
Yeah.
I don't want you to go through too much trouble. You can't dial that.
You need to pull your microphone over so you.
No, I was just asking if, can you dial that a little bit to make it a little more clear? Or?
It's the perfect 1994
Yeah,
technology.
That's fine.
At least it's not the.
Yeah, the transfer. Yeah, I had to clean those in detention all the time. Ugh, horrible.
Detention. Dwight, you didn't bring your reading glasses with you?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Try that.
There you go.
Still blurry. So the other contractual services is mostly the CRA policing.
That's all the CRA policing.
Okay. That was-
You'll see that the decline of 140,000, that's because the equipment, the cameras, the license plate readers, the cars, they've been taken out.
Okay.
And I have confirmed, in fact, today, that they do intend to expend those funds this fiscal year for that equipment.
So the one thing I'll point out, I saw the 5-year capital plan in here. I don't know if that was for this item or if that's for a subsequent item in the backup for this.
Yes, so in the backup for this, that's the, I believe that's the city's total capital plan. Yes, it's not just the CRA.
Okay.
So that's just part of the entire comprehensive budget package.
Okay. So to Mr. Davis's comment before, we have 10 years left of the CRA if it's not extended, so that's about $11 million we'll have coming in total. Parking garage being 15 million, so even if we do that, it's going to have other funding sources, and if there's anything else we want to do. The one thing I saw that was kind of missing from the capital plan was that plan that our RMR put together, their
RMA?
capital plan that had $30-40 million of stuff, like all the projects we wanted. Is that something that we can get it added into the overall 5-year capital plan or 10-year capital plan whenever that comes about next time?
Next time, yes. So that was part of one of the reasons that they did their presentation, so we can get clear direction from staff and we know how to move forward. So the following budget years, you'll now see that incorporated as part of it.
Okay, so we can, if there's going to be bond issuances for projects, I want to make sure that the CRA isn't forgotten about because that budget didn't get added to the other budget.
Correct.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions? Comments?
Oh,
I just want to make sure I comment
Somebody.
correctly. The RMA capital plan was incorporated into your 5-year capital. However, there's 400, it calls on 245K in the latter years. The reason is because the components in some of the CRA capital is being funneled right now through mobility, and we found other funding sources because it calls on $4 million a debt call. So only 245K is called on the capital budget right now that is being funded directly just because we got to reallocate CRA budget. But $4 million of debt is incorporated through the city call on debt, general obligation, and then the remainder of it has components of the CRA projects that could be mobility funded. So we factored that in, so it's in the 1%, it's in the mobility portions of it. So, but the RMA was factored in.
Okay, it would just be nice for this board to see it presented kind of that way, because 5 of us saw the capital plan, not the whole board saw the capital plan, so just,
Yes,
I don't
sir.
know if we can formulate that for the whole CRA, like as a separate body to kind of look at.
We will take care of that.
Yes, sir. So.
Any other comment?
Looking for an approval?
Could I entertain a motion for adoption of the proposed budget?
Motion to approve.
I'll second it. We have a motion from Councilmember Askew, a second from Mayor Blackwell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it carries unanimously. Thank you. Brings us to our next items under staff reports and updates, our downtown business grants.
Yes, so I want to start by saying this requires no approval by the CRA board, but because the area of which these grants will be issued, I felt it was imperative that the CRA board is aware. So as you know, we've heard some concerns from our downtown businesses because of the ongoing construction. They have had issues with trying to get marketing and get customers into their business. And so under the direction of the city council, the city manager has diligently created this grant program for marketing where it's up to $50,000 per business, $50,000 total, $1,000 per business, and the business needs to be located in the entertainment district. So disregard where it says business must be located on or adjacent to New York and Pennsylvania Avenue. It actually needs to be in the entertainment district. That was modified after the PowerPoint was submitted in. The other change that we've done is that there is no minimum business age requirement to it. So even if it's a new business to our entertainment district, they're still eligible to receive this funding. It also should be noted that the funds come from the OUC Business Retention Fund. The application period opened on the 1st, which was Monday, and the deadline is September 30th. And that was done so that we have enough time as staff to make sure that they get paid not only promptly, but also we can close it out by the end of this fiscal year and not have any carryover. So if there's any questions, but again, this was just for informational purposes only.
So it has to be used for marketing? Just generically, any marketing?
So as I instructed the downtown business group, I said, whatever that means to you. So the marketing to get customers into your business. We will request a final report once the funds are expended that just tells us how did they go about spending that funding. And so if they have receipts, that would be great if they can at least provide a narrative. But there needs to be some sort of final report issued to us that tells us how they use the funds.
By the DBG or by each business that receives them?
By each business that receives funding.
Okay. And someone from the city went to, like, just for one of them anyway, the DBG to promote this, or they haven't yet?
Yes, so we have gone to the DBG this week, I think that was Wednesday or so, and made that presentation. We've also done 2 interviews with Positively Osceola. I know they also have an article online, as well as we've posted it on the city's social media pages.
Kind of along that line, how is the city, or who is the city liaison with all these businesses during this construction when they're having issues? So that they aren't going to the contractor, which seems inappropriate for everybody.
So we have Mr. David Bridle, who's our business navigator. He's our lead on that, and we have weekly meetings and also phone calls during the week with Cathcart's representatives.
But how about the merchants?
They come to Mr. Bridle.
And I could pull out at my light, but I own a business on Pennsylvania, so there is a young lady that comes by every
She's our
week.
contract PIO.
Oh, is that what? She's
Yes.
super nice. She takes a lot of notes and
No.
Maddie or
Maddie, yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. We hired her as a contract just to help us,
Yeah.
public information
very
on this project.
very polite, very resourceful young lady, by the way.
Very good.
Impressed.
Is that city representative going to the DBG meetings?
Yes.
And I believe we
Yes.
issue out either weekly
Yes.
or biweekly newsletter.
Correct.
I'm sorry?
We issue out a weekly newsletter to the businesses as well that instructs the construction process.
How do they get that?
Is it via email, if I'm not
The email, and
mistaken?
they also get weekly updates of, and also any schedule changes or delays. That's going out through our communications director.
Because
Right.
there
And I
just
believe-
seem, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I was just going to say, it's now being updated also to include parking options.
Okay. There just seems to be a lot of griping going on around downtown with the merchants. And part of it, I think, is just, A, the economy is constricting, B, it's a bad time of year for the businesses downtown. You know, so it's easy for them to jump on and blame and complain about the construction, where that's probably only a very small or
But even if they complain, Mr. Davis, I've also found them to be very reasonable when we sit down with them and communicate effectively with them. And initially, I can just be honest, we weren't. And we've got on top of that. I'm very comfortable with but yeah, I get it. I've heard them. I actually walked down and met with some of the merchants and, listened to their concerns.
Okay.
And, and we're still working with Cathcart to see if we can expedite the construction also.
They seem to be doing pretty well this time. I mean, to me, I think they're, whatever the problem was the first time here on the New York Avenue, they seem to have a much better grasp of this project. I don't know if it's just who they have running it, or maybe after they run into the problems on the first one, now they were a little more aware of what to look for this time. But they seem to be doing a better job. But I mean, we eat downtown a lot, and we still hear a little bit of that. And you're not going to eliminate all of it. I get that.
We understand.
Okay, so that's fine.
Member Matheny.
Thank you. I just wanted to tell Member Davis, I had emailed the city PIO actually this morning, Mary Emma, and said, hey, can you take this grant program and walk it door to door and knock on the businesses? And she said, great idea, that she would do it in this week's PIO roundhouse, because I know that's a common complaint. I know the city can do what the city can do, but no one ever seems to know what's going on.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know. I try to tag people and stuff, but it just, I don't know what the disconnect is. I know we try hard and publish and put, and I don't know what the secret sauce is to get people to be able to see information, but, so I just said, hey, when you walk down, could you hand them the flyer and give them the information? So that's supposed to happen this week.
The good thing is it's a relatively finite number of merchants, so it's not like they have to deal with 1,000 different people. I mean, it's a manageable group, I think.
How many businesses are there that could be
36.
eligible?
50.
Well, 35 now, isn't there?
50, 35?
Well, 50 is what you could pay for, but how many businesses are there?
Oh, I see what she's
Oh,
saying.
how many businesses are in
Up to
downtown?
50.
Wait, is there
In the
100
district.
businesses downtown, and so that you can only get half of them, or is
I
there?
don't have that number.
He's saying 35,
Yeah,
36.
I think it's somewhere around 35. There was
So
36, but I
everybody
think
could
there's.
get
We looked up that when we got that
That's
number.
just.
If there's only, let's say there's 35 and we have 50,000, can we look at maybe having a second round available to use up the 50 at some point?
But we could, and we also, again, by council action, we could do that, because it'd have to go over my authority. Also, we were just talking about having the downtown business group actually apply for one of the grants too, and maybe come back and ask for a little bit more
And they
money.
could do like a mass marketing type thing?
Right.
That might
So-
have even more
Yeah.
impact.
So we've been discussing that internally also.
I unhit my light, but I'm going to keep going. But it's funny you bring that up, because I was talking about how Main Street does that program where they have the dollars to expend downtown,
Oh.
and then you can come buy the dollar, so maybe the balance of the money could be like that, where they double the money to spend on downtown businesses or something. Because I feel like that's really actual dollars
think
going
that-
into the downtown.
That's an excellent.
That is a good idea, because that's a very popular program
Yeah,
for.
it's super successful.
Again, I'll put it on my notes to discuss with the city council on the 11th, and we'll have a good handle on what kind of applications we're getting by then.
Right, I'll tell you, as of today, we've received one.
But it just
When-
came out when?
It came out Monday.
Monday, yeah.
So in 3 days, 4 days, we have one
I have to
applicant.
sign them yet, I guess.
Member Irvin.
Is there any possibility of using the remaining money on maybe some kind of utility assistance for some of these businesses? I've spoken to a couple of them that are
Right,
suggested
that was our initial idea, and again, like I said, I hope we get more applications, we'll have maybe more money to do some different things, but absolutely can look at that, and again, I'll bring that up there in my time.
Is there more money potentially available if the council allocates it? I mean, reasonably available?
I don't know what's in that for phase 3, I don't know, I don't remember the bottom line number.
Yes, so there is limited funding available. The intention of Phase 3 was to provide more technical assistance than it was financial assistance. What we've noticed is that we're starting to give funding to the same businesses. And so we preferred to teach some businesses how to fish instead of giving them fish. And so that's why we adopted, for example, the Growth Wheel program, which was one-on-one counseling to help businesses learn how to pivot their operations. When we first did that program, we've only done it for 1 year. We had about 3 graduates. And it's, again, to Board Members Matheny's point about trying to get the word out, and you try all these different methods to do it, and still, you're trying to figure out the secret sauce. However, the graduates of that program, which we did in conjunction with the city of Kissimmee, realized at least a 10% gain in their sales, all the ones that participated. So we have quantifiable metrics that show that it works to offer technical assistance. It's just getting more businesses to participate. And when you compare that to getting a grant, it's, if you choose, should I get free money, or should I, sign up for an hour a month for a 6-month program? Obviously the grant is going to be more enticing.
Member Askew.
Is, while we're on the subject, what is the update on the downtown construction? I've heard next year it's going to be finished. I've heard in the fall. I've heard all kinds of things.
So we met with Cathcart, and they said they'd be finished by December. Actually, they said they were going into December, and I said that's not acceptable. That was what I responded back to them with, and so they came back and said they'd be done before December. And again, we're looking for ways to them to expedite. They could work an extra day a week. I mean, and then we even proffered the idea of, can they work at night? Again, that would be an additional cost, and we already are double what we budgeted. We had to do some allocations for that. So I'm not in favor of that, but
Noise might be an issue for the few residents that live downtown.
correct. And there's all kinds of, we do something else is not gonna, somebody else is gonna be unhappy.
All right, thank you.
Member Matheny.
So what was the original end date? Was it in October? I thought it was October.
I thought it was Labor Day.
September. Well,
with the
just
superintendent's
to point
okay.
out, we have liquidated damages.
That's correct.
So I wouldn't let them extend anything. There's liquidated damages, and hold them to the contract.
And to go, to piggyback on that, remember, we delayed the project
Right.
because we didn't want to affect the downtown businesses during their prime season, which is, the winter months.
That's right.
And that actually cost us some money because they already, didn't mobilize yet, so they charged us more money. So I reminded them that the other day on the phone call.
One thing is the weather, I think, has cooperated with them this summer more than sometimes. I mean, we've had a pretty moderately dry summer.
And as you know, Mr. Davis, being in construction, you get unforeseen things that happen. There were some utility pipes that weren't on the maps.
Right.
We had some issues with OUC supply chain, so there's some delays that, and I'm sure any good project manager builds those delays in. So I just
Tries to.
Try to, yeah. But there's things that happen.
Yeah.
Do we have any other discussion regarding our downtown business grants? If not, thank you for that. Let's move on to the bi-monthly financials.
Wendy Palazzo, Finance Director. This is your bi-monthly financials for the CRA. We are at 83% of budget at this current cycle as we prepare to close down 7 weeks away from the end of fiscal year close. Attached in your documents, you'll see the budgeted 21-22 at $2.8 million, rounded off to 2.9. Actual performance from October through July, we are at $1.2 million. The BOCC, obviously, that's the 1.1. And then interfund transfers into the CRA as inflows are at $246,898 and are on schedule as budgeted. Your expenditures and other uses for the like on personnel, budgeted again, a balance of $2.9 million balance with your inflows. Expended up to July, $1.2 million. Of that, just to give you the statistics that you had requested in your financials with percent of budget. In the category of personnel, you're currently at 62.8 or 63% expended, therefore on track to have some savings there. In operating, you're at 29.1% of expenditure burn comparative to where we are right now at the 83% mark of budget. That is overall with a balance remaining and available of $1.6 million to be 100% fully burned if that were the case, but you are projected to be well under the budgeted expenditures. Total excess and/or deficit over revenue and expenditures, 2,614 for the reported period in front of you. Any questions? I'd be more than happy to answer them, but that is your summary of bi-monthly financials.
Do we have any questions? If not, move on to the next item. FRA Annual Conference.
So the annual FRA conference this year is in Daytona Beach. It is scheduled for October 12th through the 14th. I want to inform the board to find out if any of you would be interested, because I believe those dates conflict with some potential other meeting schedules. Just so the board knows, I also confirmed there will not be virtual options, so it will be a solely in-person event. Oh, and also the agenda has not been released yet.
Are you wanting to know about participation now, or?
At least potential participation, so that we as staff can determine for other potential meeting conflicts. And
Is
if we need to
anyone here that
reschedule.
would like to attend that meeting?
I want to, but I don't think I can.
I'd like to, but I'd have to check my schedule.
Yeah, I'd like to too, but I'd check my schedule also.
So once everyone checks their schedule,
I've
if they
enjoyed those
could,
conferences.
yes, if they could, to let staff know, so we can make the appropriate arrangements.
All right. Moving on.
And then lastly is the 22-23 meeting calendar. It's for informational purposes only. It continues to be the first Thursday of every other month at 6 p.m. The dates have been listed for you. Again, it's for just informational purposes only. Sorry, were there any questions?
Any questions? That's pretty clear. Thank you. This brings us to the next item on our agenda, members update. Member Davis.
Nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Member Loading.
Nothing?
Member Trace.
Good.
Member Askew.
I'm good, thank you, Mayor.
Member Urban.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Member Matheny.
I'll keep it going.
All right.
Mr. Sturgeon.
Yeah, I'm going to ruin that. Thank you. I have some good news. I was just notified today that our Deputy City Manager, Veronica Miller, has completed all of the coursework and testing and is now certified by the Florida Redevelopment Association as a FRA, Florida Redevelopment Administration Redevelopment Administrator. So good job. Good job. Additionally, Board, I'd like to tell you tonight's the last night I will sit as your administrator for your CRA. And I get to spend another nice long meeting. I want to tell you that for next August. But I want to thank Mr. Loading and Mr. Davis for your candor and your engagement in this process. We've done some really cool projects together. And so it's been an honor and privilege to serve both as the city manager and also administrator for the CRA. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm sure we'll miss you. You'll come here every other Thursday night and sit in the audience, don't you?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct, not correct.
Yeah, right.
Immediately no.
And we certainly appreciate your leadership. Mr. Manzares.
I do not have anything, sir. Thank you.
I do not have any items. Is anyone out there in the public wanting to comment? I do not see
Should there be
anything.
anyone?
For your information, our next CRA meeting is scheduled for Thursday, October the 6th, 2022. With that, there's nothing else on our agenda. We will be adjourned.